Hey everyone, this is YouTube Vids, and this is the COVID-19 update for the state of Ohio for April 17th, 2020. So, going forward, I'm going to keep these charts or these graphs. Actually, I'm only going to end up showing two of these now going forward because I feel like the ones I'm showing now have all the information that really matters at this point. So, let's start off with today's numbers. So again, it's been a few days since I've done an update, actually since the 14th. I have the 15th, 16th, and 17th up here now. We're just going to focus on today. So the update for today is there are 77,677 tests completed. Out of that, there are 9,107 people who have tested positive. And over the 15th and 16th, we had 3,000 plus tests, and then today we had under 3,000, and that's been kind of a trend I've noticed for whatever reason over the past couple of weeks. It seems like Friday's numbers are always low, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's Friday or what, but Friday's numbers always seem to be low, and that's usually, again, their numbers, from my understanding, from what they said during the press conferences, I believe their numbers close at like 11 in the morning or something. And then they don't update them on their website till 2. So basically you have between 11 a.m. the prior day and 11 a.m. the current day, which should reflect the difference, in these numbers. And so it's just weird how from Thursday to Friday the number of daily tests always seems to be low. I don't know why, by like 1,000 or several hundred. Either way, moving on. So that is the difference for today. So we're at 9,107 cases in Ohio overall. Now let's look at this compared to the projections. Now this is where things are starting to get a little interesting now, because Ohio has not been here before. If you notice, again, this is the trend starting from April 5th compared to the OSU model that they put together on April 5th. And so as you can see, all the way up until the 14th, where I gave my last update, we've been steady at under 400. There was one time where we spiked just above 400 new cases for that day for about a week and a half. And then all of a sudden, when we hit the 15th, we went up to 511. Then 16th, we went up to 623. And then today, we went up to 693. So the spike or the peak has not happened yet. So the last update I gave, and what the doctor still keeps saying for whatever reason, is that she still keeps saying that she feels like we've hit this plateau where our peak is going to be more flat than anything else, but we've started to peak beyond what was originally kind of, I guess, the new peak. So, and it's interesting, again, if we look back at if go thinking about the other graph that I showed you, looking at this, I mean, we're not doing any more tests than what we were doing before. So it would be one thing if we said, okay, well, we were doing like maybe double the tests per day, and then now our number's higher as far as actual cases, but like that's not the case. So it's just very interesting why all of a sudden now we're doing the same number of tests, but now we have more cases. So I'm not sure where that's coming from or why that's happening. It's just something that we need to start keeping an eye on here, because when it felt like Ohio, we were kind of out of the woods to some extent, like these past 3 days doesn't give me, I'm not saying I'm not optimistic, but I am saying that it's just, I'm less optimistic than I was before that we were at our peak. At least based on what the doctor's been saying. So we'll have to see how this starts to trend over the next week or so and see if this number keeps going up or if this starts to flatten or come down or whatever the case may be. So that is just something I found very interesting. Now let's talk about the updates from the press conferences over the past few days. I'm really just going to focus on today because, again, the stuff they talk about every day is practically the same. But today they focused on, okay, Mike DeWine talked about what can you expect after May 1st. So as far as we're concerned right now, for all Ohioans, the plan is, it looks like the executive order that he has in place, or the stay-at-home order that is in place currently, will expire after May 1st. But what he talked about today was, okay, what can you expect to happen after May 1st? So let's go through the list. So you'll still have continued social distancing in businesses. So one of the topics they focused on was, he said, look, there's businesses that could probably reopen now that just need to institute the social distancing measures that essential businesses that are still open have already adhered to. And so their first point of focus is going to be identifying those businesses, the ones that aren't currently deemed essential, and figuring out, okay, what can we apply to them so that they can reopen. And so they're going to have to talk about that with the federal government, because again, some of the other questions that have been that was asked today, one of the other questions that was asked today, which is what I've been asking for the past 2 days now, is, remember the federal guidelines in the program that Donald Trump and the task force has outlined. In order to qualify to reopen your state for business, you have to meet this slew of criteria. One of those pieces of criteria is that you have to show that there's a steady decline in the number of cases that you have, and that has to take place over a 2-week period. And that's why this is going to be very interesting, is because, again, Ohio was steady, but now we've peaked, where our numbers are starting to climb over the past few days. And so that doesn't adhere to the guidelines set forth by the federal government. And so the question was asked today, like, well, what makes you think that Ohio is going to be given like the green light after May 1st to be able to reopen if this is the case? And, DeWine seems to think that there's reason to believe that, like, we've got some data to show the federal government and prove to them, like, okay, we can still do this and not put anyone else at risk. So I think that's the approach they're taking, which, that's fine. As long as you can do it in an educated way, that makes sense. But so it goes to show you that obviously, so the guidelines are just the guidelines. And as long as you can prove that, like, hey, I can get businesses back open and put people back to work without putting people at risk, and that not being the reason why your numbers are increasing. Our numbers are already increasing, and it has nothing to do with things being reopened, right? So that's really the point there. But very good question nonetheless. Again, so let's move on to the other point. So he said, mask wearing is still going to be something that is going to be strongly suggested. He hasn't gone as far as saying that he's going to dictate that mask wearing is required, like Governor Cuomo did in New York, and I believe the governor of New Jersey did as well. Services, he said, services are going to have to be frequently, commonly used services are going to have to be frequently sanitized. You're going to see people wearing gloves. They said businesses should probably stagger lunch breaks to make sure that, you keep, especially at cafeterias and stuff like that, you keep them not crowded, so that way people can adhere to the social distancing rules. They said now for any company where employees can work from home, they said, you should continue to let people work from home if they can work from home. There's no reason to just rush people back to work. So if you have a job where you currently work from home, which is what actually is similar to my case, in theory, your business shouldn't be, your company shouldn't be forcing you to have to rush back to work, because you do have remote access opportunities. And so there's no reason to rush people like that back to work. They said, the checking of temperatures of employees at some type of frequency, again, this is just a general rule of thumb. He didn't say how often that would happen. If that's like every day you come into the door, they're going to check your temperature, or if it's like once every few days or a couple days, they'll do that. Again, these are things that they're going to be revealing over the course of the next couple of weeks. So I think the state's going to have their own guidelines and potentially their own order that goes along with it. There may be some mandates that come down, or executive orders that come down from Mike DeWine to say, like, your business has to adhere to these rules at the very least in order to be considered to be reopened. And that would certainly impact the businesses that are considered essential now, and it would impact anyone that isn't considered essential but would be meet the standards or the guidelines for being able to reopen. They said the continued limitation of occupancy in stores. So again, they're saying to retailers, like right now, they already have the stringent demands on retailers that you should only have so many occupants in your store to make sure that you can maintain social distancing guidelines within your stores. That still has to persist for however long that ends up needing to be. So again, there's no there's no clear definition as to when that's going to end, which makes perfect sense because again, until there's a vaccine and people can know for a fact that they're completely safe, um, then these measures are going to remain in place for that period of time. So again, this could be up until the end of next year, meaning 2021, that all this stuff is still in place for all we know. And then again, the final point was just staying home if you're sick. So that's something that again they're still going to keep. And again, that's as a general rule, but we all know, if you work in an office environment or any environment for that matter, that there's people that go to work sick because they don't want to take their sick days and stuff like that unless they're like absolutely like dying. Essentially, they're saying, look, if you're sick and there's a chance that you can make someone else contagious or transmit the disease to someone else, like you just need to stay at home. So employers are going to definitely have to make sure that they're enforcing that more so than they've done in the past, if they've ever really done that in the past. So a few other points that came out of that, and again, I realize this update is long, but it has been 3 days, so I'm not going to promise these updates will stay under 5 minutes anymore, just because there's a lot more to talk about after a few days have passed. But there's still no answers to how to improve the amount of testing available beyond what is in the control of the state. So they still keep talking about, hey, we've got bits and pieces of the things required to test, and we can produce only so much of the things that we can that will help us ramp up testing, but still there's still a ceiling there. And so DeWine said, like, we've got the capacity for labs and all these other places to do all this testing, but we don't have enough tests to give them in order to do more tests. So again, it's the thing about what I explained in the past, like, some labs, some of these places, they may have the test tube and they have the fluid, but they don't have the swab, or they may have the swab and the test tube, but they don't have the fluid, and so on and so forth. So those things are still problematic from the state, and that's why we keep staying around this 3,500 or 3,000 like tests per day range, is because they just can't possibly. There's not enough material to do more. And so that is the one thing that Mike DeWine said they're focused on, is they're trying to figure out, how do I do more testing. Now, one of the things he did mention in today's press conference about that was there was an article or some story that broke like 3 days ago or 4 days ago. I think I saw it actually the same day or the day after my last update, was that Ohio State University, I believe it was OSU or some other company in Ohio they said they've been using a certain liquid that they developed that is supposed to replace like that other liquid that they're using to preserve the specimens. They found some other solution they came up with to replace that, and they said it's been working, and they've been using it for weeks now, supposedly, or at least they've been testing it, I guess, for weeks now. And so at that point, they were asking for rushed FDA approval, or the emergency FDA approval, so they can start using that in replacement of this other, like, the other substance that is very difficult to get a hold of. And so it sounds like if we could get that approved by the FDA, then that gives us, in theory, that opens up a lot of avenues for Ohio. That means that we should be able to produce all of the things necessary to have these test kits available, and that would allow us to ramp up our test kits and then therefore do more tests daily and all that kind of stuff. So let's just hope that that's something that, Mike DeWine said that he has to follow up with the FDA on that and see if we can get that approved. And again, if we can get that approved, then we can get a lot more testing done in Ohio sooner than later. Let's see. They said that there's going to be answers early next week regarding schools reopening. So Mike DeWine said he has calls this weekend going on with superintendents from a variety of schools, and so they're going to talk about what that process might be, if that's going to happen, or all that kind of stuff. So again, there's obviously a lot of conversation and thought that needs to go into that. But he said early next week is when you should hear more about schools potentially reopening in the state of Ohio. And I think that about covers it. That covers all the points I wanted to cover for today. Again, I realize it's a long video, but definitely a lot of things have changed over the past since the last update. And so that's why it's better that I give these updates less frequently, because then there's more information I can provide and there's more substantive information I can provide, and there's some analysis that I can do over the course of over the days since the prior update. So a lot of interesting things happening. Again, we'll have to see where this upward trend goes, and as far as our daily cases in Ohio. The weekend will be another telling point, maybe. If it continues to go up over the weekend, that'll be interesting as well. Or if this is just some kind of like glitch in the matrix, so to speak, or it's just a temporary spike. I'm not really sure what it is, but we'll have to see. And again, only time will tell. So again, guys, appreciate anyone who watches these videos. Hope I'm providing you good enough and beneficial information, especially if you live in the state. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy the content. If you really enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you know when I publish new updates. So thank you again, everyone, for your continued support. And until my next update, bye-bye.